When the United States watched as Stalin's Soviet Union developed nuclear weapons, it was careful in its rhetoric. When it saw a far more threatening leader, Mao Zedong, pursuing nuclear weapons, it was even more cautious. Mao insisted he had no fear of nuclear war because China would still have more than enough survivors to defeat Western imperialists. And yet, successive U.S. administrations kept their cool. The world is already living with a nuclear North Korea. It has for a decade. If that reality cannot be reversed through negotiations and diplomacy and sanctions, the task will be to develop a robust system of deterrence, the kind that kept the peace with Stalin's Russia and Mao's China. Bluster from the president can increase the dangers of miscalculation. I think Americans should sleep well at night, have no concerns about this particular rhetoric of the last few days, said Rex Tillerson on Wednesday. This was an unusual, perhaps unprecedented statement. The Secretary of State seems to have been telling Americans and the world to ignore the rhetoric, not of the North Korean dictator, but of his own boss, the President of the United States. It is probably what Donald Trump's associates have done for him all his life. They know that the guiding mantra for Donald Trump has been not the art of the deal, but the art of the bluff. For more, go to cnn.com/Fareed and read my Washington Post column this week. And let's get started. Next on GPS, the Korea crisis. Is all the back and forth between Trump and Kim Jong-un bluster? Or is a war in Asia really possible? I've got a great panel when we come back. I want to bring in two people who know the Korean situation very well. Kevin Rudd was Prime Minister of Australia twice, and he served as Foreign Minister in between his two terms as PM. He's now President of the Asia Society Policy Institute. And Victor Cha is the Korea Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He was Director of Asian Affairs at the NSC during the George W. Bush administration. Kevin, let me start with you. How do you think people in the region are reacting, countries in the region are reacting to this ratcheting up of rhetoric that has taken place over the last few weeks by North Korea, certainly, but also by the Trump administration in a fairly unusual way?
I think there are probably two things going on in the minds of the region at the moment. One is their general perception of the United States, which they see as more uncertain in its general strategic behaviour than has been the case in the past. Secondly, on the question of the North Korean scenario in particular, obviously people are objectively anxious about what's changing, and that's all because of what the North Koreans have done. But recently they begin to see the language which starts to build a problem into a crisis, and then you start to enter into discussions about crisis management. And that's when I think people become particularly anxious. That's the mood I pick up.
Victor, do you think that this kind of rhetoric can spiral out of control?
Well, Fareed, I certainly hope not. On the one hand, I do think that the rhetoric has gone up, but at the same time, I'm not certain how much comments by the U.S. president would actually change North Korean behavior. We've had past U.S. presidents that have been very calm and quiet when it comes to North Korea, ones who've been more vocal, and North Korean behavior seems to be the same in either case. So to me, the most important thing now is to avert miscalculation. And in that sense, some of the very strong statements by the U.S. this past week may actually help to reinforce deterrence. We have to remember in 1993, Bill Clinton once said that if North Korea used a nuclear weapon, it would be the end of the country as they knew it. And that was a pretty strong statement of deterrence.
But Kevin, as Victor Cha points out, nothing has really changed North Korea's behavior. You could act tough on them and threaten. You can be less threatening. You know, there are many who say, look, this is a country that is buying insurance against what appear to be an array of world powers that want to get rid of it. Maybe we should be trying another tactic, trying to see if there's a way to talk to them, try to see if there's a way to negotiate with them. Certainly, the Trump administration keeps saying it's changing policy, but it strikes me this is the same policy. It's been threats, 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 sanctions, sanctions, sanctions for 30 years, really.
This is a regime, as Victor, who's an expert in the field, has correctly said, has been through it all before. But they're also dealing with a president who, in my judgment, is unique in many respects compared with his predecessors since the period of 1993, which Victor referred to before.
Unique in what sense?
Well, unique in the sense that he sees a virtue in his own strategic unpredictability. He's actually said that, not specifically in relation to North Korea, but more generally. And secondly, with President Trump, there is this whole notion that his is a muscular presidency when it comes to international action, and that, I think, creates a fresh set of new uncertainties. The key thing that worries me, though, and I've just come back from China yesterday, Fareed, is when people discuss the possibility of unilateral US military action against the North, the Chinese baseline conclusion is this is just one huge bluff. And as a consequence, that results in a Chinese view that, yeah, we'll do a few things to try and talk the North Koreans into coming around to a more reasonable posture, at least freezing what they're currently doing. But at the end of the day, if the North Koreans evolve into a fully replete nuclear weapons state with ICBMs, with miniaturized warheads on top, then, well, the Chinese view is the US will then just have to accept that reality. And what none of us know is whether President Trump will ultimately accept a position in history which says, I'm the guy and was on my watch that this state finally crossed the threshold of constituting a threat to the US mainland.
US policy toward China on this issue, it seems to me, should be far more strategic, sustained, and less about angry tweets, you know, kind of braggadocio, bravado, the kind of rhetoric. You've dealt with China all your life. You speak Mandarin fluently. What is your sense? How should Donald Trump be dealing with China?
Look, with anyone dealing with Xi Jinping, this guy is a serious hardhead. He's a serious hard ass. I mean, this guy has been around for a while. And if there's going to be a serious conversation here about the future of the Korean Peninsula, it has to be conducted in clear, bottom line, but quiet terms between one administration and the other. The question of Chinese historical paranoia about the Korean Peninsula is absolutely fundamental in this, and you've therefore got to deal with it in a comprehensive way and not just pick out the nuclear bit and say, that's the only thing we're concerned about. That's what my advice would be to the administration, and for all I know, they may be doing that through their own quiet diplomatic channels as well.
Victor, do you think that that's the kind of strategy? And again, it seems to me if that is the strategy, angry denunciations and tweets aren't really helping.
Well, I mean, I do agree with Kevin that in the end, it appears that the only real solution to this problem is some sort of grand bargain with the United States and China. And along the lines that Kevin described, the difficult part, of course, is that that sort of grand bargain requires really a deep level of trust among the leaders of the two countries, and that just doesn't exist today. And it's hard to create something like that. It has to happen over time.
On that sober note, thank you both.